Welcome to Roots Radio, a conversation about soccer, art, culture, and community that takes an inside look at the birth and growth of the Oakland Roots Sports Club through the eyes of the players, workers, and fans. I'm your host, Richie Nuñez, and in this series, we interview special guests from the worlds of sports, culture, media, and social activism. On this episode, we have the honor of featuring renowned director, producer, screenwriter, musician, and activist Boots Riley. You may know him as the creative force behind the film Sorry to Bother You, or from his newly released series, I'm a Virgo. In addition to his film work, our guest has a rich background in music, having been a driving force in the influential Bay Area hip-hop group, the Coup. He's also a passionate advocate for social justice, with his commitment to making a positive impact extending well beyond the screen and the stage. Please follow the Oakland Roots on social media to stay up to date on the latest episodes, and don't forget to review and subscribe to our show. Oakland first, always.
My name is Boots Riley. I'm from Oakland, California. Been here since I was 6, so since 1977. And let's see, I do music, film, put out a bunch of albums with my group, the Coup. And then I made a movie. I wrote and directed a movie a few years ago called Sorry to Bother You. And I created a TV show that we have out right now that's about a 13-foot tall black man who lives in Oakland, California. It's called I'm a Virgo. Well, I didn't star in it. I showed up for a couple hours, and it's in there, me and my son. And yeah, it was just fun. And I love what they were setting out to do and how beautiful that movie is. Yeah. Yeah. This is what we did, the Power Caller suite, man. Like we used a lot of the spaces in here for that. And then downstairs is where we built the, right below this on the first floor is where we built the lobby for for Regal View. And then right across the street is where his chic apartment was. So, that's one way we were able to save money is do everything in about a 1.5 mile radius. Well, I actually wrote it I wrote the first draft in 2010, and it took a long time to get it off the ground because, you're a rapper and, nobody wants to read your script because you're a rapper. They're like, of course you want to make a movie. You probably also want to do, a clothing line and a restaurant or whatever. They don't think you're serious about it. So I was able to get David Cross and Patton Oswalt to read it and, kind of co-sign saying it was funny. So then people started saying, oh, maybe it actually is funny. So more people started, checking it out. Then I ran into Dave Eggers, who runs McSweeney's, and had him read it. By this time, we're talking 2014. So talking 4 years after I had written it. And I had made an album, which was called Sorry to Bother You, to try to bring attention to the fact that I had written this script. But by this time it's 2014. Dave Eggers says, because at that point I was giving up on it, kind of. I was saying, I'm just going to put the script up on the internet and let people read it that way. And then maybe even though I can't get it made, maybe one day people will be like, look at this script that Boots wrote, And, but he was like, don't put it up on the internet. Let me put it out on McSweeney's. So he put it out as part of the McSweeney's quarterly, but bound as its own book and packaged with the McSweeney's Quarterly, which went out to like 10 or 20,000 people. And then it was taken a little bit more seriously because Dave Eggers is a good writer. And if he's saying this is good and you have to check this out, then even if people didn't read it, they were like, okay, this must be real. And then I was trying to I needed people to think of me as not only a writer, but a filmmaker. And so I was trying to get in to be part of SF Film, in their film house, to be called a filmmaker in residence, because I felt like once somebody said I was a filmmaker, then that might make it easier for me to raise money for it. And so I was talking to them, but again, they're like, okay, you do music, so obviously you're just, this is not serious to you. And I mean, they didn't say it in those ways, but so I'm having a meeting, like an interview with the woman that ran Film House at the time, and we're sitting outside in North Beach and at a cafe, and I'm, trying to hype her up and can't tell whether she's buying it or not. But then up comes a black car, a black SUV, tinted windows, and the window rolls down. And it's Dave Chappelle, and he says, "Boots Riley, what are you doing here, man?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm having a meeting." He's like, "I got a show tonight. You got to come." And so I was like, okay. And then it drove off, and she was like, "That's Dave Chappelle." And I was like, "Yeah, he says he wants to be in the movie, but I'm trying to figure that out." Wasn't true at all. But that made the movie seem bigger. And I became a filmmaker in residence. So all of a sudden, I'm a filmmaker in residence. And there I met, at Film House, I met people who would later become, first of all, I became around filmmakers who were actually getting films made and talking about the process of raising money for it and all of that kind of stuff. And so it seemed like something that you could do in the same way that earlier in my life, being around people who were actually making records and putting records out, like I saw MC Ant and Ant Banks had a record. It was clear and and you could see it you could get it at the record store. But I saw them the other day at Keisha's Inn in Berkeley or whatever. And they were real people, and they made this real thing, and they just went to the studio and did this. So it was like, you can do this, right? So in that same way, I was around filmmakers at Film House who were like, yeah, I did this. I'm going to shoot for this many days. I need this much money, and, figuring it out. And so that made it seem doable. And there I met producers who had films in Sundance before, and and got them on board, which is also why I was in Fremont, because one of the producers is one of the producers of Fremont. So I asked if I could come through. So so they were on as producers. So now, I was a writer with a script that, people that know stuff like. Then I was officially a filmmaker, and I had producers who had not only gotten movies made, but gotten movies made that had gotten into the Sundance Film Festival. So all of this is like the stone soup. Like, hey, these folks are on board. And I submitted it. I had submitted it before I had producers to the Sundance Labs. Got rejected. And then I submitted it again once I had producers and got in for right. Well, actually, that's not even the whole story. I took like about 30 copies of the McSweeney's published script and went to the Sundance Film Festival with a bag of scripts and was on the bus handing out scripts to agents. I got into parties that I wasn't supposed to get into and was like, bam, check this out. Bam, check this out. And, so people the networking part is easy. A lot of people, especially from the Bay Area, know how to network. But the thing that seals it in is when you have the thing to network for. You have a thing that people are gonna like. But of course, at Sundance Film Festival, everybody's doing that, so it takes a while for that to trickle down. But I met Ann Lai, who was at Sundance, and got her the script, met with her, and she invited me. She invited me to apply for the Sundance Labs, and that's when I got in. And and there's this myth that once you get into the Sundance Writing Lab, if your film gets made, then it's going to get into the Sundance Film Festival. And it's not true at all. Most people that go to the Sundance Writing or Directors Labs don't get into the Sundance Film Festival. But I definitely am part of spreading the myth that you do, because that's what I did. I was like, I'm in the Sundance Labs. I'm getting into the film festival. So that's how we tried to raise money. And that's how we did raise money. And at one point, I got Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele was going to play the lead. Then he directed Get Out and was like, I don't want to act anymore. And he was like, but I'll help you out. And I was like, and he was like, who do you want? And I said, Donald Glover. And he was like, cool, I'll help get this to him. Donald Glover was like, okay, I want to do it. And so all of that like created this buzz, like this must be, because, a lot of times in Hollywood, people aren't really even reading scripts, right? They're like, oh, this is what this is about. This is blah, 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 or they like go through it fast. But this made it be quote unquote hot, because first you had Jordan Peele, who had done a public reading in LA of the script as Cassius Green, and then along with a bunch of other folks. And then you had Donald Glover saying it, but then Donald Glover got the Lando Calrissian role and was like, I can't do it. As soon as he hung up the phone, I guess his manager was somewhere nearby, because his manager called me. Lakeith's manager was somewhere nearby, because Lakeith's manager called me and said, you gotta think about Lakeith Stanfield. And met with him. And there we go. So you ask a question of how I got it done, and I'm going to give you a 30-minute answer, and that's it. I mean, you're always hopefully making stuff that you think people are going to like. So yeah. I mean, it's all, but it doesn't always work out that way. So the anticipation was like, I can't wait for people to see this. You just never know whether it's going to get marketed in a way where people are actually going to see it or hear it or whatever you're doing. All that process that I just told you about, there came to be a certain point when I was like, I'm only going to get this movie made if I spend a lot more time trying to make it happen. And that meant not touring in the same way I had been touring. And, the Coup used to do a lot of shows every year, but we weren't the biggest group in the world. So, when you're collecting pennies, you got to collect a lot of them, right? And that's what tour was. It kept me alive to a certain extent. And so, but to get the movie made, I had to make a lot of sacrifices in that term. And, and I went through a period of not only being behind on rent for 10 months at a time, like for like many years, like where I had a landlord that was like letting me slide with being behind on rent, to a point where after a few years, he was like, I got to sell the house. Can you, let's just call it even out without the move out thing. And you, and so then I moved into another place in which I was actually squatting. So I moved in and started squatting the house for a number of years, during that time. And the whole time I had this plan, like, look, I'm going to get it into the Sundance Film Festival. It's going to be the talk of the festival. And I'm seeing how much each year the film that was the talk of the festival was getting bought for. And I'm like, I'll be good. I'll be able to pay people back who I owe money. I'll be able to do it, And it didn't happen that way. When we got to the festival, we were the talk of the festival, like critics, everything, and a bidding war. However, during the bidding war, or before the numbers actually started coming in, somebody that had been involved in the film when the budget was $3 million, leaked that out. So, usually you don't want to tell people how much something costs, because maybe it costs $20 million and someone needs to come with $20 million. Who knows? It actually only cost $4 million. But this person had been involved when it cost even less than that. So they leaked it because one of the people involved in bidding had a lot of money. So they tried to get the numbers down so that they could buy it. Not the person that we ended up selling to, but so they leaked it out, and everybody was like, oh, we know it only cost $3 million, so you'll take this. And meanwhile, it's investors that had put the money in, and they're the ones that are over whether they sell it or not. And so it took a lot of work to even get it up to $4 million for everybody to just break even. So, meaning I left there with the film that was the talk of Sundance, all this buzz around, with no money, right? And so I was like actually thinking, like, okay, that was cool. I have this thing. I'm gonna have to go get a job because I can't pay rent next month, right? And WME, who was a sales agent at the time, was like, hey, if you got ideas, we can help you sell them. You can make some money right now. So Media Res, who was a production company who had loved Sorry to Bother You, they immediately were like, we want to do something with them. But they were working in the TV field. And I had these ideas that I thought maybe would be, in my mind, would just be feature films. And so this was one of them. And it wasn't even a filled out idea. I was just like, 13-foot tall black man lives in Oakland. That's all I knew about it. But I knew that the juxtaposition of ideas and what all that means was like something fertile to that I'd come up with something interesting around that. And, I pitched it all over the place. Media Res was actually also represented by my agency, because by then I had signed on a WME. And they were like, cool, we'll give you some money to write this. And so that's where that came from. Why I did TV instead. And so I wrote a pilot and wrote out story beats for a season, and then we took it around. There were a number of bidders, but at that point I didn't have a choice in who it would sell to, but that was the one that Media Res wanted to go with. Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for contradiction. Contradiction is at the heart of irony, right? And irony is at the heart of both tragedy and comedy. And contradiction is also what you're exposing. Contradictions and heightening contradictions is what you're doing when you're giving an analysis of how the world works, right? Or how anything works. You're like, the engine, if you analyze how a car engine works, like, this, and I'm saying this not really knowing exactly how a car engine works, but, this will spark right here, and it will, ignite this, and this other thing pushes against that, blah, blah, blah. It's all exposing what the contradictions are and what the forces involved are. So, if something's, so in life, I'm looking at the contradictions, and I'm always heightening in my head what that would be to a certain absurd point, and it feels interesting. It sparks questions, all those sorts of things. So that's why when I thought about 13-foot tall black man in Oakland, like all of what all that meant, what all that said, seemed fertile ground to talk about. Basically, all the stuff I always talk about. Yeah. Yes, it's all the same to me. It's all the same. It's all, I'm always, because I never been, I never been real good at freestyle. At times in my career where I was like, you know what? I want to get good at that so I could just do that at a show or something like that. And there was a period in the 90s where, I did try to do that. But, for instance, when you freestyle, you kind of got to let any idea come in and just go out. You got to go. You can't be second guessing what you will say and what you want. So it's really just all about what's there in, like it's just going through your filter, the world. And for me, I have all the same influences that everybody else has, because I live in the world. And so that's not necessarily what I want to put out there, though. So I'm often, when I'm writing, not only am I thinking about that for content, I'm thinking about it for style and quality, right? Like, oh, do I want to say this or do I want to say that? And how does this word feel with that? How does it, and I'm doing all of those things. And that's, to me, why, I got known as a lyricist, first and foremost, was about that, like playing with feeling and emotion that comes up through the choice of words, through the stories that I tell, through all of those things. Now, when I'm freestyle, it's none of that. It's not really, there might be a cadence style or delivery style, but the writing of it is not that. I have to just be like, boom, here's this, here's that. And when I get used to doing that, then I start accepting more things in my writing that I wouldn't have normally accepted before. You know, like when I write, I try to not have any throwaway lines. Like sometimes people will be like, oh, I got this raw line for the beginning, and I got this other thing that if I get to it at the end, that'll be raw. And then they just have all this stuff to get them from one place to another. But I always want it to be every single line has something in it that's worth thinking about, and maybe multiple things, right? And so freestyling has not been something that there's probably somebody that can do both really well, but not for me. And so along with that, with my writing, I'm thinking about what am I writing for screenplays? I'm thinking about how this moment makes someone feel. You know, how long should it be till I get to this next part, right? What are the things I can do that, in it that gives someone this visceral feeling as opposed to just an intellectual thing, because that's also something I'm doing with the music and with the writing too. So all of those things are put together. I was reading this, when I was thinking about whether I should just write Sorry to Bother You and let somebody else direct it, or whether I should do it myself. And during the time while I was trying to figure out, what would be the problems with me directing it myself, and whether there were other things I needed to learn first. I was reading this book called The Conversations, and the book is a book of transcribed conversations between an author named Michael Ondaatje and Walter Murch. Walter Murch is the first person to call himself a sound designer. And he came here to the Bay Area with Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas to kind of try to create this revolutionary film collective that, now they've made great films, but I don't think any of them are revolutionary politically. And I don't think they would say they are. But my point is that, so Walter Murch is very, his stuff is all about sound and editing. He also was the editor, of a lot of those movies, from The Godfather to Apocalypse Now and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so in this book, he's talking about the beginnings of film, and he's talking about how there's always a lot of how there are always a lot of inventions that happen that might be amazing, but the culture wasn't ready for them, and they just become forgotten. So he talks about how Edison didn't think film was a thing that was going to take off, because he was like, well, people have seen their image before. They've seen paintings. They've even seen photographs. They've seen their self in reflections from mirrors to water to whatever. And it's not as amazing. But what was amazing to people was hearing their voice, because people had never heard it before. It felt like they were listening to a ghost or something like that. So everybody was amazed by sound. So he was like, sound is going to be bigger than film. And he noted all of these things, like all these inventions through time, like the Aztecs had the wheel, but they didn't use it for transportation. They used it for toys for kids. And ancient Greeks had a steam engine that they didn't, I don't even remember what they used it for, but it wasn't for something that connected with things. And, we know ancient Egyptians had heart transplant surgery. And, so the idea was that film was going to be this other thing that fell by the wayside. But the thing that Walter Murch said made it be something culturally relevant was where people were at with music at the time. Because what kept film going was the story. Like at first when film started out, it was these little like almost YouTube clips, right? Where you got, here's somebody falling from a thing, here's somebody riding a horse, here's some, and it was like you go and you see these things that you might not have seen before. But that would have just been a fad if it weren't for the story being able to be told in the way that it's able to be told. And you couldn't tell it just like a 3-act play because that was pretty static for folks. So at the time, people that were first going to see movies had been used to classical music. And classical music has all of these sections to it, some that are, kind of low and slow, some that get real crazy and angry and, and a lot more instruments in them, to this other thing with this solo, beautiful thing, so they were used to these suites. And that allowed people to be ready for a language where film did that same thing. Starts off like this, then goes to this crescendo, then comes down, all that kind of stuff. And that the rhythm of that being connected to music is what drew people into the film. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, I can just use everything I believe about music when I'm producing music, when I'm making it. I can use that for constructing the film. And as a matter of fact, because I'm also the producer of, the Coup's music, the last 2 albums I co-produced with a good friend of mine, Damian Gallegos, because I'm the producer, often I'll be in a room, in a studio with a bunch of musicians, and I'm the worst musician there, right? Like, I might be in a room with, somebody who's considered to be the best guitar player in the world, somebody who's a world-renowned bass player, somebody who's a drummer who thinks he's the best drummer in the world and is not necessarily. And, and I gotta have this piece of music that I believe in, and I gotta have them play it, not just because they're getting paid to be there, but because they believe in it. So I have to be able to talk to them in their language, to have them connect to the parts that I know, and from also knowing them, to have them connect to the parts that I know they'll connect to, and bring it to fruition. And I have to know when the bass player says, "Oh, you know what, this would be better," and they show me something better, I have to be like, Yeah, we're doing that. We're doing yours. And I have to have my ego attached to the final product as opposed to attached to every step of the way. But along with that, I also have to know when the guitar player who knows way more about guitar than I do, I have to know he's going to want a guitar solo, even when we don't need one. I have to be able to say, you know more about guitar, but I know about what we need to do right here. So we're not having that, right? And so all of those things are things that you bring into directing a film. Well, you have to, yeah, I would say that makes sense because definitely with music, you have to know yourself and even the parts that you wouldn't want to show other people, because those are actually the parts that other people connect to, right? Sometimes people connect to the other thing that is the performative part because they are also doing that in life too. But those are the things that people connect to, and I think when you're trying to write or direct things that in which you're showing somebody's humanity, there are little things that are the things that you don't often think about that aren't necessarily thought of as cinematic or in musical that are that just come from knowing yourself. Like with a song, for instance, if you were to think about like what love songs are about or breakup songs are about, they kind of have the same thing, like, do you love me? I love you. How much do you love me? Do you love only me? Do you love this other person more? Are you doing the, though there are things, but there are a limited amount of things for it to be called a love song or something about that. But you may have some other things like, hey, I love you a lot, but I hate when you laugh like that, right? And or this or that, to where when you add those real things in, it stops being called a love song, right? It starts being, but the more you add in these things, because we start also when we're trying to create a work of art, sometimes we forget what's from ourselves and what's from ourselves and our own understanding of the world based on the experiences we have versus our understanding of the world based on other people's understandings of the world that they've told us through art and music, right? So like we regurgitate some of these things, and you often have to, when creating stuff, for me, I have to sit there and think, what do I really think about this? What actually happened to me? What did I think at that time? And getting in touch with the real feelings around that. And then it really comes up when you're talking to actors, when you're actually filming it, because you need to have some connection with not only the work, but some real idea about how humans are feeling in that moment. And for you, because I'm always going for a more naturalistic style. I don't always do that, but I'm usually going for that. And so I need people to be in the feeling that they'd be having, not just like, hey, this is an angry part, and so I'm going to do my angry face and my angry voice, And so that has to do with being in touch with yourself to be able to even communicate that and to write it in the first place and then communicate that and know what you're looking for in a performance as well. Mm-hmm. that song obviously makes reference to the guillotine, which was used during the French Revolution, in which the ruling class of the time, which were they many of them got executed. What this song is actually referring to is the power that the working class has. The fact that we have the power to get rid of the ruling class through creating a whole different system. And that would be the metaphorical guillotine that we actually have. I also picked this song because it's something that gets used by actually a professional soccer team a lot. You would know better than me, but the Kansas City, I believe, whatever that team is. But anyway, that team, whatever, they got a big stadium. Only way I know is because all of their fans will send me clips of the crowd will chant, "We got the guillotine." I guess they had some fans there, and so they use it and they have banners of it. And before we started this, I told you I don't know a lot about sports. I know that because people are sending it to me because of my music. But it also, I spent a lot of time in Italy, and I was in Milan when they won whatever the thing is before you go to the World Cup, whatever. And the sense of unity and danger that existed at the time. I was like in the square where the Duomo is, just when it happened, and people came pouring out all over from all over the city into the streets, and nothing moved. Like as soon as they won, and then a crowd gathered there. I mean, it was just packed. And people were singing these beautiful songs with all these melodies and counter melodies and stuff. And they all meant "fuck your mother," right? And there was, and like the team came through on standing on top of a double-decker bus or something like that. And like really, it seemed like the crowd was gonna pull them down and rape them or something like that. It was like they loved them. They were shaking the bus and like the police had to, it was crazy. But that sense that the music had to do with this feeling of togetherness and this feeling of community is something that's one thing that I've cut most sports out of my life, because in order to get all the stuff done, I cut sports and video games out of my life. So I only know the big, I know who Steph Curry is, right? Okay, that's it. And then, and what's funny, because I had this other group called Street Sweeper Social Club with a guy named Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. And because of Rage Against the Machine, and they're in LA, we had a lot of athletes that would come backstage. So it'd be like all the Dodgers or whatever. And I don't know who anybody is. And, they'd be talking to me, blah, 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 this and that. It's like when pointing at, so it's like when he did that first base thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't watch sports. And they're like, yeah, whatever, right? Like, not believing me, right? So, but what I miss from it is that sense of community. I went to one Raiders game in my life. I took my son, and I was, and it was like we walking through the parking lot, and Raider Nation and everybody like trying to hand you food and all that kind of stuff. And, and at the drop of a dime, people would be like, Raiders, and answer back. And that felt like that thing. And I remember, and it was like, I was like, they were playing somebody from the Midwest. They wear blue. I don't know what it is. Anyway, but somebody came with wearing the other team's colors, and everybody started going, boo, and they turned around because they were carrying a baby, and a bunch of people were like, fuck that baby. And that was messed up. But overall, I felt like had I gone to one when I was like, say 18 or 19, then I would have got lost in that. You know what I'm saying? I would have been like, this is the revolution, or whatever, and just kind of been caught up in all of that. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it would have felt really good, to like, you see that and you see people like making these connections. And, so I do like watching sports live for some of that, but that is like some of the most that I got. And then also, went, obviously I've been to Roots games, and it started because my son, my youngest son he wanted to do marching band stuff, and he had been studying drums and all that kind of stuff. And then I knew that my friend Eric Waters had been in a bunch of marching bands. He was like, oh, well, you need to come to the Roots game because that's what we do. And so went through and did that, and that felt like some of that. So, like when I go to the games, I am looking at the game a little bit, but it's more like just being in the crowd. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, it's talking about, that it's talking about class struggle, and and giving a giving a sense of class analysis and class struggle. There's a thing I like. There's a saying that somebody was like, class consciousness is knowing what side of the fence you're on. Class analysis is knowing who's there with you, right? And the idea being put forward in this is that through that class struggle, through chopping the head off capitalism, we can create a new world in which the people democratically control the wealth we create with our labor. I don't know, because I think, like it's been a while since I haven't been creating things, but I think I have some insight into it in the sense that since I've been doing TV and film and spending most of my time doing that, I've not been making music as much. And so, for instance, The Guillotine, even though it talks about, terrible things, it's an optimistic song. And I learned that, a lot of the reason for the optimism in the songs is because I'm making the emotions that I need, right? Yeah, I'm making the song, I'm making songs to make listeners feel a certain way, but I'm the first listener, right? And I'm making songs to make myself feel a certain way. And so when I don't do that, I get really, I'm a lot more depressed now while I'm making film and TV, because it's a different sort of a thing. I don't have that, with the song, I might think of something and create most of it within a certain amount of hours. It's a years long process for like the TV show. Worked on it for about 4 years, right? The movie, wrote it in 2010, came out in 2018. So there's a whole. I was making music during that time, that first one, but yeah. So definitely being able to to create something with a certain emotional slant for me has been part of how I regulate those things. No, my music is for other people to listen to, right? So I'm creating with the idea that, and what I create is different depending on who I think is listening. That's just how it is. Like I never talked to a wall before, right? Not that that would be wrong. I just never have. It's always been with the listener in mind, right? And but that process, with that process, I'm still the first listener, and I have to love it for me to even judge whether anybody else would love it. I can't judge whether anybody else would love it. I have to think that if I love it, if I'm excited about it, that other people are going to be like me to some extent, and they're going to love it and be excited by it. Mm. I mean, who struggle with creative expression, you're saying? It's interesting you say that because you know, since after I started making records, I've had periods in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write a journal and just write down my thoughts. But I find myself thinking, well, one day somebody's gonna find this. So I'm thinking about the ways that I'm writing my sentences. I'm thinking about what I'm saying and if I should say this rather than that. And I just myself, I had to quit because I have this feeling that somebody's going to read it at some point. And maybe if I was freer and didn't care what people think when they read it, then it could work for me. But it hasn't been able to work for me because of that. But yeah, I think here's the thing. I think that one reason that creating things can help with mental health is that, it's the material thing that we're working on. Like, again, like it's, everything can be theory, but until it becomes real in the world, it's just too abstract. And I think creating art that has to do with the feeling that you want to express makes it feel real and gives you something to hold on to. I have an adult son who is involved with creative growth. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They work with folks with various kinds of disabilities and make art, and some of the folks from there were talking about how, there are people that are even nonverbal that are making these great works of art, and actually ended up communicating to some extent with folks in order to do it, because there's a reason. It's the art is the thing. And I think maybe that's connected to you writing or creating any other art, is that it gives you a focus of something physical in the real world, even if it's just words on a paper or words on a computer or something like that. That that maybe gives some grounding to at least assessing what your own feelings are, and going for something else. Yeah. 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 Let it roll off your shoulder. I have to say, I don't know, medically whether it's right or not. I've had periods of time going to therapists and stuff like that where I got overly sensitive to everything, and I wasn't able to let anything roll off my shoulder. So I see where people come to that conclusion of like, man, just suck it up and let that go. Because I had to stop going to therapists because I started being like thinking about the thoughts and thinking. But I think there's some balance in there, what I'm saying? And maybe people that are like, just suck it up and go on, they're fighting, they're worried about that thing where you're just sensitive to everything, versus some sort of balance where you let yourself feel something and then you choose the things you're gonna, not deal with. Hmm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Well, the imposter syndrome, let me tell you, it's real, but the truth is everybody's an imposter. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. And that's the thing uh, that helped me with producing music and making films and TV, is to realize, okay, there's things I don't know, things I haven't done. There's a lot of things everybody hasn't done and everybody doesn't know. And certain fields are full of people that make a living by saying they have the answers and by saying they know how it should be done. And and they do things in the way that they are supposed to be done, quote unquote. But those are the ways that are boring, that nobody really cares about in the end, that just kind of float by. But when you realize, okay, we're all figuring it out. And I learned, I knew that to a certain extent, but I really consciously kind of put it into words for myself when I was at Sundance Labs. So, the the structure and so much about Sorry to Bother You is quote unquote wrong with filmmaking. Like, just the way it's set up, things that I do in it, all these sorts of things. And so I go to Sundance Labs, where, in the way the writing lab is set up, you meet with a few different established writers every day, right? And they have read your work. They give you notes. They say, you should do this. I think you should do that. And there were some people there that really did not like what I was doing. They were like, no, you got to start a, huh? Yeah, and they were being honest. They were like, I think you should do this. I think you should do that. And there were some people that were like, this is the best thing I've ever read. And then they would argue with each other about it. So you have these people that are masters of their craft that are not in agreement at all about how it should be done. And they're arguing like hard with each other at that point with my work. And I was like, wow, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. Nobody knows how to do it. Everybody's just figuring it out as they go along. And so what that means is that they're all imposters and so am I. Well, so I don't think I think of it as imposter syndrome, but I'm every day thinking about whether I'm wasting my time or not. It's not really like, I think I've figured out that, if you can assess correctly what it takes to do a thing, then you can figure out the steps and you're aware of what obstacles you have. You can figure out the steps to get around to do the thing that you want. So that's not a thing to me, but it's more about, I have a limited time on earth. Is what I'm doing effective? Am I spending my time wisely? Am I missing out on things? So those are things that are always going through my head. What do you mean by sustainable? Mm, yeah, I don't know. I don't. You mean physically deplete you or emotionally? Like, yeah. I don't know if I've figured it out, but I think part of it is um, making sure that you're that the process is, because okay, to do anything that hasn't been done or to do anything that um, isn't already set up for you is going to take a lot more work than like a 8-hour a day job or something like that. So you got to make sure that it's not just the end goal that you will find exciting. It's not just the end goal that is the payoff, but that the process is also part of it. You got to make that, something like, whether that means that you're doing the work with people that you enjoy being around, or whether that means that you find some joy in the creativity of that particular thing right there. I remember there was a time in my life where I felt like I was working with a bunch of people that many of them were assholes. And I thought, okay, any musician that's going to be good, they probably spent a lot of hours, by themselves practicing. And it's going to give them certain social skills that make them assholes. And I was like, well, okay, so that's just going to be what I'm doing until I get to this next place. And then I can, but, after a while, I was like, what? Fuck, this is my life. I might, I think, I might die at any time. I've had a number of situations that where basically I almost died. And you're like, oh, wow, this is all I got is right now. And so I realized, okay, I don't have to I like part of the music sounding good to me is working with people that I like, you know.
There it is. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Check it out. Move. If you got the nerve, lash out for your just desserts. It's not just the words. Some of y'all heads up in the cloud. I'ma bring y'all back to earth. It's black back to burn. Bullshit y'all talking about. Out your mouth, I'm not concerned. Cause y'all got to learn. It's y'all turn like Detroit Red. When his head had an ultra perm. The long walk, I burn your bare heels, so throw on your boots. The game camouflage like army suits. But I can see it more clear cause I came with the coupe in here. Ring the alarm, inform the troops. Send them out into the world, go to war on the fluke. Eye to eye with the enemy you sworn to shoot. Now I'm coming at your neck, sick of hearing something wrong.
Yeah, so I think we recorded that song in maybe 2004 or 2005. That's a song with me, Talib Kweli, and Black Thought from The Roots. It's also a sports connection. It's the theme song to Winning Time, to the first and second season. First season is Black Thought's first because he comes first on the song, and then second season is my verse, so I come second. It was also on one of those NBA video games. So it has an association with sports. But I had met Talib. I'd known Black Thought in the 90s from doing shows with The Roots. And then I met Talib when I was with Black Thought and Dead Prez in South Africa. And we did this trip to South Africa and with the thing called the Black August Tour, which was meant to talk about the fact that there are political prisoners in the United States as well as around the world, but to not forget that the U.S. has political prisoners. And this was in the year 2001. I think we got back to the U.S. September 7th, 2001. And so from that thing on, we were talking about doing a song, always talking about doing a song. And this was the thing, and I went, took the song down. Black Thought was living in L.A. at the time, brought music down, and I had a whole bunch of beats, and the second beat I played was this one, and Black Thought was like, "That's it," and I was like, "No, hear these other beats." He was like, "No. I don't want to like something else more. I want this. That's how we do it, And he wrote his verse in about 15, 20 minutes. And I heard it, he laid it down, I was like, I'm not doing my verse right now. I got it. I'm taking this home. There's no way that I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna sit and write for a couple weeks, but I can't let you get me on my own album. And he was like, all right, do what you got to do. And so, that was that's Black Thought's 20-minute verse versus my 2-week verse. But I think also it was a little bit of me it took longer because, I also respected his lyrics a lot more. So it made me, maybe second guess a lot of my stuff. So that was part of the thing, taking longer. And I had to call up, before I laid it, I had to call up Stick and see Stick from Dead Prez and be like, are you sure it's good? It's like, man, you better lay that verse right now and put out the song as quick as possible. And So that's how we did that. But yeah, it's so I don't know what else to say about the song. If they're listening to the thing, they'll hear what it's about. Um, let's see. So my father grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and as a teenager, he got involved with the NAACP and CORE, and while he was in CORE, he met my older sister's mother, who was a white woman who had come through on the Freedom Rides, and she got pregnant, and it was the early '60s in North Carolina, and the police didn't like him walking around with a pregnant white woman and threatened their lives, and they ended up here. And once he had broken up with her, then he became involved with more radical organizations. He went from CORE to Progressive Labor Party, which was a radical communist organization, and SDS, and they were involved in making in agitating the San Francisco State University student strike that created the School of Ethnic Studies. And during that time, he met my mother, and they actually moved away. The party moved them away to organize in Chicago, which is where I was born. Then moved to Detroit, and then my father split from that organization at the time when he moved back to Oakland to go to Golden Gate Law School and become a lawyer. Before that, he'd been a bus driver and a organizer, and so he graduated law school when I was 8 or 9, and yeah, and my mother had come here. My mother had my older sister on her side when she was 16 and living in New York, and her mother had kind of moved away. Her mother thought she was too young to be a grandmother and kind of moved here to Berkeley and to get away from all of that. And my mother ended up following her with my older sister, and then they were here. So then went back to school later on. Yeah. Like I said, I've been here since I'm 6, so it's hard for me to really know what that is, because it's part of what it makes you. It's the way I talk, the way I think about things. That's one reason why. Even back in the '90s with the music, and again now with doing film and TV, there's always this push by people you're working with to be like, you just need to move to LA, makes it streamlined. That's where the business is, right? So you move to LA. And I've seen this done many times, and then your stuff stops being specific about where you're from. It starts being these general ideas about how people act toward each other or whatever, or how the world works, or how, it becomes more general and becomes less interesting. It feels less real. And so, but I try to be as specific and real to life as I can. And part of that has to do with me just being around, like if you live in LA and you go sit at a cafe and drink coffee, most of the people around you are going to be talking about some producer they work for, or whether it's time to start casting for this thing or something like that. And the people that you're around are in that industry and have even the way they think and talk affected by that. And this, I can come and, there are people that definitely know me from what I do and all of that. But, the people are more involved in other aspects of life. So, it doesn't start, the art doesn't feed on itself. Mm-hmm. Well, the days are surely gone. Everything changes all the time. For me, it's a little bit hard to, there are things like, I go past places that are even very lively now or whatever, but that weren't when I was younger. And, but I have other memories there. So it's like being in a very busy, colorful ghost town, right? To me, and that just comes, but it's also a little bit hard for me to measure what it is, because I've also changed during that time. Like I just talked about going to a coffee shop. When I was in my younger 20s, I would never have gone to a coffee shop. I'm only drinking coffee to stay up all night in the studio, but it's as a drug, not because I love it, which I do now, right? So I've changed the things that I'm into and the things that I do. So there's been two changes happening, right? The way we used to have fun is we used to get in whoever had the car with the loudest system in it, and we would drive from Bayfair on East 14th, which is now International. We drive from there as slow as possible. Drive from there, then all the way down here to downtown and somewhere get on a San Pablo, and then go all the way, past there, even to Richmond. That would be our entertainment, right? Stopping, talking to girls, all that kind of stuff. Or you might be like, we need to get in touch with so-and-so. You don't have a cell phone, so on your route, you're driving through and stopping at somebody's house and yelling to see if they're there or whatever. And so that was the thing to do. So life has changed a lot. But there's no doubt that the biggest change came from rent raising up and people being moved out. So, when we talk about, it's hard to talk about gentrification and the fight against it without the main thing that needs to be talked about, which is rent control, right? And that's the only way to stop that, like a real rent control, and public housing. So and often the talk about art and creating spaces for more art is sometimes tied into policies that make gentrification easier, right? So in the 90s, there was all this talk about, and And Jerry Brown did a lot of stuff talking about like, oh, we're going to make artist lofts and stuff like that. Well, what does that mean? It just means things made into expensive spaces, and maybe the person works at a tech company and every now and then does a painting or something like that. And instead of being like, okay, at the time in the 90s, what Oakland was most known for around the world was its music. You had people with murals of artists from Oakland all over the world, right? And I was like, well, instead of artist lofts or affordable artist housing, what about low-income artist housing? People didn't want to talk about that. Projects that are made for folks that are doing music or art. Projects where it's got soundproofed rooms so that people can make their music. Things like that. Housing projects, I mean. And those are the things that keep that creative aspect alive. Still enough of the same, you know what I'm saying? And it definitely would be way different if I would say this, it's the most, it still has aspects to it that I recognize and connect to, I live next door to somebody I went to high school with, that sort of a thing, right? So it's, it has all of those things, some of the stuff left. And, like I said, everything is always changing. The question is to control how it changes, right? And that has to do with keeping things to where they're affordable for the folks that live here, making sure that jobs pay enough, things like that. Okay. Yeah.
That's right. Gotta get up on the phone. Bust this verse right here. Alright, okay. I'm anti-imperial, anti-trust, anti-gun if the shit won't bust, anti-corporate date, anti-my essence, anti-snorting them antidepressants, but I'm not pro-popping. I'm provocative and pro-stopping them FBI operatives who professional at black man pounds and hand you a sentence that you can't pronounce. I'm also anti-narco, anti-vice, 911 marks the anti-Christ, they anti-social point M16, cause I'm anti the anti-nigga machine, proletarian, funkadelic, parliamentarian, pro-revolt in the 21st century, pro-running up in Congress saying fuck it all, but bring the people with you, that's the protocol. This be the drill for like jailbreaks. The whole world is anti-United States.
Yeah, there's I kind of picked it just because I like how it sounds, but also what it is talking about is that space that you get into where where there are ideas being talked about and you think that you can skate around them or not deal with them, and it might, with the idea that it might make your life easier to do that. And I think Howard Zinn has a book called You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train. Things are moving, things are changing. There's no neutral on that. You're going with the train, right? And just this idea that you gotta stand for something. You only got this one time to be here. For instance, right now, a lot of people are afraid. Some of it is based on real things. Some of it isn't, but a lot of people are afraid to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. some of it is also because in reality, we don't know how the hell we can have anything to do with stopping it. But some of it is being afraid of what will happen if they did. And in the end, you don't want to look back at this time in history when your kids are asking you, well, what did you say? What did you do? And you think about it and realize that it just happened and you let it pass. That would be one of the worst feelings of regret, like, I think about that a lot, about what I'll regret. And I'm sure I have a lot of things I'll regret. But there are certain things we can control, that whether we regret them or not. And something like this, we want to feel like we did everything we can do. And we didn't bite our tongues. And so that's one reason that this song is important right now.